Welcome to the Regenaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Griggs. Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.
And today alongside me, I have Logan from Fire and Farm. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a first for me, I guess. I'm usually on the other side of the mic with my own podcast, but it's a long time coming. We've been going back and forth, so I'm really grateful to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, so we had a really awesome phone conversation. I think it was last week. And I guess to get started, if you just wanted to share, your background and your upbringing, because I know this has been a big part of you since, as you can remember, I would assume.
So I didn't grow up on a family farm. I actually started my first job was delivering papers when I was a kid. We always, mom and dad always wanted to make sure that we got that work ethic instilled in us. And then when I was 12, I got hired to be just kind of a yard guy on a farm and really fell in love with it. And I worked summers and falls with him in Liberty, Saskatchewan for like 10 or 11 years, and really drove my passion for agriculture and land. And it's just so beautiful. You're outside when it's nice out, and I always love that because the job I had before was working as a butcher, and I hated that being inside, but I learned a lot of valuable skills doing that. But something about being outside with crops really spoke to me. So I took an interest to that, enrolled in the University of Saskatchewan agricultural program, which is, I would say, a top two in the country. There's a couple in Ontario that would probably beg to differ, but it's right there. So through that, did a lot of networking. Classes are kind of so, but the networking is usually where the value is there, and ended up landing a job, I guess, first in Nokomis with a Blair's Ag, which is a ag retail, and now out in Rosetown, working for another ag retail, Simplot, which would be more familiar for the United States listeners or in both countries. So, we're just really passionate about the soil health and the longevity of the communities that work in agriculture. Like Saskatchewan we have, potash mining, oil, and agriculture. And that's, if you're not working in one of those three, you're either a teacher or a nurse kind of thing. So, and, through working with that and kind of understanding where we are in the world, given all these circumstances, I rode that fear of starting my own little ranch. And by no means is it paying any bills, but I think that you have to start. I told you on the phone there that I think, it's kind of a calling to me that I have to be the guy, the man of the family who provides meat and food and sustenance for my wife and two boys. So knowing where my food came from and just blind trust in myself, I was able to just find a lease, put a couple cows out there, and learn for the summer, and really glad I did that. So that's kind of my journey. I'm still working in ag retail and that industrial space, but keenly interested in understanding and learning how my food gets to my plate and being the one who was going to provide that, right? So
That's awesome. So wanted to take it back to whenever you were a kid working on the farm. You said you were 12 years old?
Yeah, 12, I think. Yeah.
So if you can, because I'm trying to remember back when I was 12, if you can remember, just what was that experience like as you were on that land? And especially at that young of age.
It was quite insane because I remember my first day. The guy I was helping farm, we had to move auger. So an auger is something that moves grain kind of up and down. It's I guess most people know that. And we were moving augers to a different bin yard, and he just said, hop in that truck and follow me. And I had never driven before, so he just kind of assumed that I would know what I'm doing. And I remember getting in the truck and being like, okay, mom has 10 and 2 in case she presses the brake before putting it in drive. And I was just like, holy shit, I am driving a truck right now with an auger behind and like following him. It was like 8 or 9 miles. And I didn't tell my mom for about a year that my first day I drove in a truck. I laugh about it now, but it could have been ugly.
Oh, very. That
Yeah,
that's just
yeah. But
wild
then,
though.
like you said, yeah. To answer your question, working on the land, like there is a, like I'm an Earth Day baby, so that has always kind of like spoken to me. I think as a deeper meaning, and it just like it really resonated with me to be. I was the one who planted the crop, and then I would swath, and then I would help in the second combine. So like I was able to do the full meal deal of like checking the runs, checking seeder depth. Very important to be able to plant that crop where it needs to go. Um, and it's just long hours pass very quickly. Very easy to be on the drill by 6 a.m. As a teenager when a lot of my other friends were probably sleeping in, kind of gaming from the night before. So there's a lot of hours where it's just like it was just me, and this is before like anybody had social media on their phone. So I was just listening to AM radio like for hours and just eating it all up and kind of being by myself. It was like premeditation kind of thing. I don't know. You have a lot of thoughts by yourself when you're 13, 14, 15.
Yeah, but that's a great point that you mentioned about just your first day and the fact that the farmer just kind of expected you to do that because
Yeah.
I hear this a lot just on the topic of just younger age children working on the farm. And I just think there's just some preconceived notions about how the owners of the farm are kind of using their children as like slave labor or something like that. But whenever I worked on the farm last year, he had three kids. One was, I believe, 5 or 6, and the other one was 3 or 4. And they always just wanted to be outside. They wanted to help with everything that was not forced whatsoever. And then I actually hopped on the phone recently with them. And it's been a full year now since I've been there. And so they've obviously grown another year. And he's just talking about how they're adding more responsibilities, but they want to be a part of that. And it just that's what I love about agriculture and working on a farm too is you're developing work ethic and just so many critical life skills at such a young
Mm-hmm.
age that it puts you way ahead of, especially in today's society, it puts you way ahead of most people. um, you develop discipline. You feel way more connected to the world. It's Yeah, it's just an entirely different lifestyle obviously than being in a major city. But I would just always find that fascinating when talking to people that, like Amish, for example, too, that they have so many children. And
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so that's why I'm just curious with that too. Did you feel at that
Well, I
age like that you were being used at all like that?
No, not at all. Like not at all. Like the guy Greg who I helped farm, I would call him like my second grandpa. I think that there's two ways to look at this. Like if you have are part of a farm that doesn't have a kind of a succession plan or a way to pass down the land and animal resources or whatever to the kids and like a structure of keeping that in the family. If you don't have that culture within your family farm, yeah, it's probably going to feel like it's slave labor or whatnot. But if you, I guess, if you can't teach that divinity of working on the land or with animals in the family farm, then maybe the kids do have to go away for a year or 10 years to kind of understand that it's pretty good out here to work in a rural setting, right? So um, like I said, I think there's just two ways to look at that. You're either raised in that nurturing, wholesome farm value, or it's punishment. You gotta. I think it all just comes down to leadership in that, and probably unfortunately too many bad stories dominate the good, which is maybe part of the times. But I think it just all comes down to how your family business is structured,
Hmm.
in my opinion, right? And I wasn't family to this guy, but he made me feel like I was part of the operation and excited to go plant and harvest and cut grass in July when there's nothing really going on, right? Just to cleaning out bins kind of thing. So I think it's just the connection of who's managing that.
That's a really good point on the fact that you said he made you just feel like a part of it, because that's exactly what the farm I was on. It's essentially what he was saying too with his children. And I mean, they would always want to be outside and helping. Whenever we'd go to farmers markets, they'd always want to help too. So yeah, I just
Yeah.
found that interesting. On just transitioning a little bit, you mentioned going to Saskatchewan University and mentioning that was the top two agriculture. Can you talk about just I guess, the ecology of Saskatchewan? Because again, on the phone, you mentioned how you argued it's the last frontier, and so I just would
Mhm.
love to hear you talk more on that, because that's coming from someone who I've never been to Canada. I guarantee you, most Americans have never been to Canada, and so that would be
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be great to shed light on.
Well, yeah, the most times Americans come up to Saskatchewan is to go bird hunting in the fall. We've got like some world-class bird hunting and freshwater fishing. So, um, a lot of people don't come, a lot of Americans don't come up here for the other types of tourism. Yet for the landscape, I guess, of Saskatchewan, it's very flat, but we have very good soils. Our organic matter, I would say across the board is for sure north of 3% on average. Like I'm dealing with some stuff where we've taken soil samples in 2001 and it was like 1.8, and that stuff is now sitting at like close to 4,
Hmm.
which is a pretty miraculous turnaround. Um, I guess the university is so I took ag business, which is like it's like economics and marketing with agriculture. There's agronomy and then the animal science division, and um, I guess I can't really speak for the animal science division other than the girls are usually the rowdiest at Thursday nights. But the agronomy program I think is as world class as you can get, and I think that the fact that they focus a lot on soil health, like I heard in a couple of my electives, it would be the soil health that gets, I don't want to say preached, but taught as kind of the fundamental structure. And I think that that's the right place to start. Um, the soil, and like I told you on the phone, the civilizations live and die on the top 6 inches of soil, right? So how we treat that and how we respect that, the life that gives is it does contribute to a healthier society, all like wholeheartedly. So I don't know if I answered your question
No,
there,
you
but I
did.
kind of yeah, okay.
With that too, just on the topic of organic matter, because you're mentioning that across the board it's around 3%, and you did sampling in 2001 and it was 1.8, and now it's
Yeah.
definitely increased. Can you just talk for the listeners that might not know what organic matter is and then why it's so important?
Yeah, organic matter, I guess, in layman's terms, is like the breakdown of all plant and life matter into like um, uh, how should I put it, a carbon based layer on the top of your soil. Um, Saskatchewan is really blessed that we have cold winters, and I say that because our soils are only in use for about 5 months of the year out of 12. Where after the combine has gone through and spread chaff on top of the soil, we get kind of a natural barrier layer to protect it from the sun and the elements, and all that microbial activity, the breakdown of the straw, the breakdown of any kind of compost, uh, all that life happens underneath the snow, and it's still going on. So we're able to we're able to build our organic matter that way because of the winter and the snow cover. The snow acts as a natural way of keeping that light. It's like what are those wood chips called that you put in your garden? Sorry, Ryan,
No,
what's it
you're good.
called? The what you know what I'm talking about? The wood chip,
Yeah, I
whatever.
just don't know the term, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Anyways, so we can cut that. Anyways, but like the 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 keeping the sun and the elements separated from the top layer of the soil allows it to continue to break down. And it seems like for others, like you got to make use of that land at all times, but it's truly a blessing to keep soils healthy is to let it rest, because you may think in the winter things are dying, but underneath all that snow cover, all the bugs and the beneficials are still doing their work, breaking things down, eating and defecating, and creating that natural cycle underneath to keep our soils at bay. At in a I don't I guess I can use a regenerative way, but like the snow really is a regenerative force for Saskatchewan farmers.
Hmm. And then on just what does 3% organic matter mean?
3% organic matter means, well, first of all, like for working in the monocrop space, like 3% organic matter kind of turns into like 25 pounds of N. So like for every percent of organic matter you can increase, you're getting like 7 to 10 pounds of naturally occurring nitrogen. And also I can't remember the figure, but I think it's like 10,000 liters of water for of water holding capacity for every percent of organic matter.
I know it's up to
Another thing we
20.
measure up here, is it 20?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Uh,
Go ahead.
your number is probably correct. Um, Another thing we measure up here is CEC. So that's the soil profile, and we use that, like we have, clay loams, sandy loams kind of thing. Where I work is a lot of heavy clay, so that we have a tough time with phos availability in those soils, but our water holding capacity is insane. Like we'll have a crust on the top, like in 2021 we had a record drought here, like we maybe had an inch or so over the growing season. Like it was really bad. Like, historically probably the worst year. The soil here had a crust on it, like with the top inch underneath was still wet. It's kind of insane how well that the a clay soil will hold that. So we look at that as, when going over soil samples with farmers as well. It's like, okay, what kind of soil structure are you dealing with here? And that soil structure can change, 7 different times in a field, and that's why a lot of guys up here are going to like a SWOT or electroconductivity mapping of their soils. They'll run an EC machine over top of their soil. Like it measures how gravity flows, and it measures like where your depressions and where your ridges are. And then we take a soil sample from each of those, and we make sure that we're putting fertilizer and seed, and matching our agronomics to each specific zone in the field, which is kind of cool. Like it's more guys every year are doing that, and not making sure that every dollar of fertilizer that they're spending is going to the right place, and making sure that, it's not going to leach off. Everybody gets angry at that, but like putting it in the right place, deeper banding it, and making sure that we're not wasting that money is a pretty cool feature in ag tech now. But
That's cool. And then just on the topic with the water holding capacity, why that's such an important thing is when you think about just all flooding and then just water runoff, that's a huge, huge issue, especially in America. Will Harris, I can't remember how long ago the video was, but he had a great video showcasing the difference between his farm and the neighbor farm that's conventionally raised, and just how awful the flooding was going on their side. And not only top of that, just the color of the water and the runoff that was going on compared to his farm was just astounding. And I think that's the greatest visual you could see from the impact of doing it the right way versus the wrong way, and the impact that can have from
100%.
just a water standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know what video you're talking about. It is a great showcase of what good soils will do for water holding capacity. And something we deal with up here is like we've got like hilltops don't grow, or have a tough time growing, especially in this drier era we seem to be in. But everybody, when we spray, just decides to kill the hilltops, right? Like you don't allow any vegetation to grow. Well, how is water and sunlight going to penetrate that to like regenerate that soil? We've compounded salt fertilizers on an area where there's no roots to break down that salt fertilizer, so you're getting a compounding effect of that, and then also you're killing anything that is growing there that will be using that to trying to break that down. So we're throwing a double-edged sword at a problem that we honestly we shouldn't fertilize those hilltops, and we shouldn't be killing even if it is weeds growing there, we shouldn't be killing the weeds that are growing there, because the roots of those weeds are still going to help break down that salts that have compounded there and allow for more water penetration. So from that standpoint, like we still have a lot to do. It's getting better every day, but we're throwing, like I told you on the phone, we're throwing the wrong we're throwing products at a problem instead of using practices to solve the problem, right? So
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's a good segue into the ag retailing that you've been doing, and just
mhm.
the topic of that. If you could just share more of your experience through that and just everything that you see, would love to hear more on that.
Yeah. So I guess for some people don't know, there's ag retails kind of all over the world, selling fertilizers mainly. That's what I focus on, because I know that pays every year in a conventional ag system. Um, I know that there's a lot of angst towards glyphosate and other chemicals that are used, and for reasons I completely understand. I would just say that glyphosate is probably the least of your concerns for some of the stuff that's in the shed. But as far as ag retails go, I think there is a lot of more work that needs to be done. I think it's become way too productized. Like everybody and their dog has a product that wants to go on our shelf to go spray on a field, and we don't stress enough about practices. And that's kind of like where your podcast and others are trying to steer people or have this conversation that Mother Earth. How am I going to word this? Mother Earth is undefeated, and we can't throw products at problems. So like we've got a weed called kochia that keeps showing up in areas where there's low crop competition or some salinity in the soil, and we keep trying to throw something to kill that, and now it's becoming resistant to a whole mitt full of weeds, mitt full of chemicals. But instead of changing how we approach that, we're just throwing gasoline on a fire and creating a bigger problem. So like kochia does not compete well with two or more plants in the area. So if we're intercropping, which I'm a large believer in intercropping in diverse species in fields, the kochia problem largely goes away. And but we're not ready to have that conversation yet of, yeah, you might have to break up 5 acres of your 160 into something different, but it is very convenient just to run the sprayer over that or to turn a blind eye to it. Like I understand that it's very convenient, and changing practices is super hard and super inconvenient, and it isn't good for the large mono or the megalith corp farm that treats every field the same, right? The changing practices really favors the small farm, and I think that that's a beautiful thing because it scales more on a smaller farm. So and then I guess on the other sides of ag retail, like I talked about how we're trying to place fertilizer and seed in the most appropriate way. I know a lot of listeners, of this podcast or something would bang on monocropping and big ag, and I understand those reasons for sure. Like I said, I'm an intercrop enthusiast and soil health enthusiast, and it is just you can't change that overnight. And if we have more discussions like this, I think, and honestly, and if we continue to have some weed problems that we continue to have, these large corporation farms are gonna just have to change, or else the land resource that they've paid for or are using is gonna go by the wayside. And like I said, the health of communities and civilizations is dependent on the top 6 inches of soil that we live near, right? So um, I don't know where else you'd want me to go with that, Ryan, but like
No, that's great.
the yeah
I was just gonna add a couple things just because
yeah
with glyphosate, I mean that's the huge
yeah we talked
topic,
about that.
huge. I mean that's the most talked about side, whether from the herbicides, insecticides, and
Hmm.
pesticides, and with that, and with just the huge Monsanto lawsuits. I mean, I think it's nearly $11 billion now. They've got constant
Hmm.
lawsuits going on, and with the topic, and specifically in America too, with the rise of gut issues around wheat, specifically
Big time.
with just like gluten and sensitivities, because there's so many people that go to, say, Italy, where you eat all kinds of pasta and bread, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so great. Why do I feel like this? But then I go back home to America and it's like that. And a lot of the topics are with glyphosate specifically, and it's just a really awful chemical that's heavily sprayed, and then it gets going back to runoff. It goes into
It's
the water.
abused, right? It's not
Yeah,
heavily sprayed, it's abused. Like it was meant to be an option of maybe I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say that when it was first brought to market, it was an option of last resort to uh either pre-burn the field as a clear up, or if you're really having tough issues, is to spray it instead of tilling, which is, from a soil health perspective, it's still better to spray that than to till. But the fact that we're using it sometimes 3 to 4 times in a season, in one growing season, especially in wheat, alarming, definitely. but again, like you have to be able to you got these things are products, not practices, and a lot of chemical salespeople have lost that way of thinking. It's you have to structurally change your practice first before you use a product. And I know that there's sales incentives and structures for people at these large corporations to get more chemical out. It's just that at what cost are we doing this, right? There's a need for them, or you can argue that there's a place for them. We just can't continue to abuse what we have, or else we're going to have some very resistant weeds and some continually very sick people eating these diets, right? Like we've had, we're a wheat belt. We supply a lot of the world's wheat here. We've had bug issues for 3 years because of drought. I am only buying organic wheat or organic, right? We have sprayed a lot of insecticide on to save wheat crops up here, and one needed, right, to protect the farmers' bottom line. Like we still need them to be able to survive. We don't have a crop insurance system like America does, where if you have land, you're almost essentially guaranteed a profit, right? Which is good and bad, right? The longevity of the family farm is obviously key, but you to go back to your point, these food systems are damaged, not broken, but they're damaged. And I think awareness, like these conversations that we're having, are great because we can start to vote with our wallet on what sort of farm food production systems we want to support, right? And I know that Will Harris will say that the feed the world stuff is kind of BS because this should come from each individual community feeding their own community, right? And which I would agree with, but we're not quite there yet. But I think guys like you and me who want to start that farm and feed only our community first, that's the first step, and it's baby steps. You can't take that gargantuan leap because that gets pretty ugly. So
Definitely. And you also mentioned that there are other chemicals that are much, much worse than glyphosate, and I was hoping that you could shed light on that as well, because I know, again, for most of the audience and just a lot of people on social media, because agriculture, specifically regenerative agriculture, is picking up a lot of steam. So
yeah,
the
and it
hot,
should.
yeah, and the topic of glyphosate is the most talked about one, and pretty much the only talked about one. So yeah, I'd love to hear
Mhm.
what you.
Yeah, so glyphosate is essentially, or it's mostly salt water. I think it gets demonized because it's the most sprayed. It's certainly not healthy for you, but there is chemicals that are used in South America and here, paraquat, diquat, that if you get it on your skin, it's activated by the sun, it will burn you. So it's a very it's quick acting, but it's you know it's not, none of these things that are sprayed are great for your skin. You smell 2,4-D, which will be in a lot of your lawn and garden weed killers, as it's selects out kind of dandelions or what have you from a grass. You can smell that from a mile away, and I'm not going to go into the breakdown of it, but I just can't imagine that that's great for you, right, when you can smell that. And again, these are products that we have. They're used as, for my customers, tools and not a practice. But glyphosate is by no means the biggest evil out there, I guess, or the worst thing for your health. I think it is getting shit on, rightfully so, because we abuse it, and I think that there has to be some pushback on that, because using it 4 times in a year, whatever it is just an abuse of a tool, right? And just it's just lazy, and that's what's I guess that's what really sucks about the industrial farming, is that it's become there's a little bit, there's not enough creativity in how we're solving our problems. And like I said before, it really sucks when I go to these meetings and we have people that they talk about is product, product, product. We have 5 companies that come in, it's product, 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 and not one person is talking about practice, 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 or different things in our soil. It's just we've lost our way a little bit, and I think we can recover. There's so many smart people in this industry, like so many. It blows my mind that some of these soil health conferences I go to, like we need to be promoting and championing those people and those conferences. And yeah, it's just there's a reason podcasts like yourself or some of these others are starting up is because everybody can see that we've lost our way a little bit, and we can correct it because we're not dumb people, we're smart people. We can make this work. We're all of God's children, right? So there's so much light in agriculture and not darkness. Like the light will always beat out the dark, and we just have to continue to have these conversations and practice what you preach, right? You have to vote with that dollar or start your own farm, right? You have to do that. It's a calling, I think, for our generation to do that.
Man, that's great. That's also just wild on some of the chemicals you're mentioning with burning your skin, which is really
Yeah.
alarming considering our skin is the biggest organ of our body, and
Hmm.
needing to wear essentially a hazmat suit just to spray those that's pretty alarming sign.
You'd be surprised, Ryan, at the amount of old farmers out here that don't wear any like gloves or nothing when they're mixing a batch. Like it's wild. I would definitely be in the hazmat suit. I'd be the hazmat suit guy. Yeah. But,
So just transitioning a little bit too, just going into you actually starting your own farm or your own ranch.
mhm.
How long? Yeah, I guess can you just explain that process? Did you just dive in and find local cows and just start and just figure it out as you went, or did you have a game plan really set in stone to where this is what I'm going to do this year, and then the following year I'm going to add a little bit more?
Yeah, I guess I'll start from very beginnings. Like I said, I'm an Earth Day baby, and I think that that speaks to my soul. So I've always been interested in these areas of fields that weren't productive and soil health. I've read a number of books over the last 3 years on soil health, and I had looked into hemp production to try and pull salts out of these fields. Never went down that business, but like was keenly interested in it. But every time I did this deep dive into soil health, it all came back to ruminant animals. And like I said, I grew up in the crop side of agriculture. I always just thought cows were just a dumb animal we eat, and they were just in feedlots. And I never understood why somebody would do it. And that's why a lot of my meat growing up was hunted. Right, my dad and I, that's kind of our thing to do is we hunted our meat, so deer and elk and moose and whatnot. So um but every time I did this deep dive, it kept coming back to cows. So that was about a year and a half or 2 years ago now. And then I decided, okay, if cows are the thing that really regenerate the soil, how do I implement that in Saskatchewan? Given that how do I implement a business model for in Saskatchewan that I don't have to go take a giant loan and you know really put stress on my family, because I think mitigating stress is the biggest thing a man can do for his family is keep all stress levels low for kids, wife, and yourself. So um, I was playing around and trying to find some the right animal for my business, the right place, pasture to start it. And it just so happened there's a guy who is running elk up here. Um, there's a 90-acre chunk with 3 different paddocks, and he was out of elk farming for the last 2 years, and it was just sitting dormant, and it was kind of on my drive to work, on my commute. So I said, riding that fear, I was like, well, if I don't make this phone call and ask what he's doing with that, then I'll kick myself kind of forever. So I did. He was more than happy to rent it out. So I secured the pasture for this year. And again, I didn't have water or anything really figured out. I just kind of took that leap of faith. And then when I was looking at which cow or which kind of cow operation I wanted to get into, I've the egg community is small but really knowledgeable. So I was polling and texting everybody from Kevin Blair, really appreciate him, Rylan Crawford. I'm going to give first name shout outs, Josh Sandin, like these guys who are in the arena doing it. I can't thank them enough, because I would text them at all hours, and I got a response like within minutes, like as if I was in the room with them, which is just, it's awesome when people are that passionate about what they do, and willingness to help is it's awesome. So I looked at my weed and grass situation at the paddocks, and I kind of needed a hardier animal. There, it's not pure lush grass. There's some weeds in there. So that's why I settled on Longhorns. So I bought some Longhorns. I was able to work the phones. Kind of just phoned around Saskatchewan and classifieds and just talking to different cowboys and got some about an hour north of where my pasture is. Just because in my first year I didn't want to I I don't know as enough, right? So I wanted to just learn the stalker side operation first. So putting animals on pasture and moving them through my paddocks. I didn't really have to move them. I only had three, which isn't, it's a pretty small operation, but just to move them from, I've got three 30-acre paddocks in a row. So just to move them from one to the other, kind of get familiar with that. And the Longhorn will eat a lot of my unfavorable weeds, whereas an Angus probably won't. So that's why I took them or chose them. And also, it's just like there has to be a little bit of an art form to your business, and not a lot of people run Longhorns up here. And if you like, to me, I looked at it, if I can build a brand out of with it, because build a brand out of it, use an animal that nobody else uses, use that animal for reasons that are agronomically sound, and then market that direct for my community. That was kind of my first year game plan, and it's worked, which has been awesome. So I'm going to expand a little bit for next year. But that's how I got into that. Is this I took a leap of faith. I knew that in my soul I needed to do it. It scared the shit out of me because I didn't come from cows. I didn't know anything about cows. All I've done is read books on cows um, and you Joel Salatin and Greg Judy videos ad nauseum, right? So, I'm like every other millennial cowboy farmer. We go to the school of Greg Judy and Joel Salatin, right? So, but at the end of the day, you have to be. It's scary, like it's for sure scary, but like just starting is so key. And having my first year under the belt, like the Longhorns are in the freezer now, and customers have picked up their order, and I couldn't be more grateful for the community support. It's just been awesome, and like you said, everybody recognizes this, that they want to buy meat locally, right? Like it's becoming part of the conscious conversation. So a little bit of right timing on both the business side and the pasture side, and a little bit of just faith, I guess, is how I started. So
That's awesome. And that's just a great example of just essentially shooting your shot with all of that, because in America there is an insane amount of farmland to where a lot of the owners don't have an heir. And so there's going to be major opportunities to where all you have to do is make a phone call and introduce yourself and just have those conversations. And you have no idea where that might lead you. And same for actually finding animals for what you want to do. And so that's just freaking awesome.
I'll tell you what, like I got pretty made fun of at Coffee Row because like at our retail, it's our coffee shop in the local community. Like we're out of town, out of two very small 100-person towns, but people come to our retail for coffee, and I was the butt of a lot of jokes, which is fair because like I didn't really know what I was doing, but I laughed with it. I just said, even if they die, at least I learned something, right? And it was a pretty low cost entry because in commercial cattle production, the Longhorns are pretty unfavorable, right? A lot of them are just used for rodeo circuit. So when you can get a discounted animal and it does agronomically what you need it to do, and then at the end of the day, its meat is still pretty darn delicious. It's worked on all three levels, and but that like you just got to know that if you get that criticism, it's just that people are they're interested in what you're doing, but you have to feel it in here to know that you got to have that self-belief, I guess. Like some of those comments can be really, kind of annoying, which is it makes the perseverance a little bit more sweet, I guess, because they didn't die, and they were well fed and they were well watered, and they did provide not only sustenance for my family but entertainment for my boys to go out and see cows and be out and feel in the field. Sorry, my dog's just going crazy.
Oh, no, you're good. We can keep talking. That's fine. Yeah. So,
just 1 second. I'll
be
right back.
Yeah, you're good.
Hey, let's go. Sorry, brother.
Oh no, it's all good, man. Um, so yeah, my actually question with that too. I'm just curious. Do you remember what just that feeling was like when you first got the Longhorns and they went on that pasture for the first day? What did? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So like I said, the pasture was uninhabited for a couple of years. So, and we've been in a drought. So the grass is very lush. Like I have probably the most lush 90 acres in my RM, which would be like a county, a rural municipality, if it would be a county for you guys. And because I don't own any equipment, I had to negotiate them delivered terms, which was again still cheaper than you know going and buying equipment and having that overhead cost. Like for a small startup farmer, it makes a lot of sense to rent everything. So they get dropped off, or they're getting brought out that day, and there's just a little bit of rain, and we've got this, like I said, we got these very heavy clay soils. So he brings them in, he gets stuck because it's just a soup kitchen in the yard. Gets stuck, whatever, gets pulled out, drives in the pasture, drops them off, and he goes, these might be the luckiest longhorns to ever live, because it was just like a glistening, really nice lush green. And I was like, just that little comment was like, oh, okay, it'll be fine, they have enough to eat here, whatever. But it was just a calamity of things that could go wrong, kind of did to start. But when they were dropped off, and they're, I paid for, and shook the guy's hand, thanked him, talked about next year, and all the plans and whatnot. And he was happy that they were going to a pasture with some great grass. And it was just, the nerves were calmed, after that, because you know it just, him getting stuck and everything, it was just a big to do. It was just, it just, it had to be, there had to be a little bit of stress. It couldn't be easy. So
Well, and I think it's just interesting that with Longhorns, and you're mentioning that just from the rodeo, because me personally, I'm not a fan of rodeos at all. I remember going to one
mhm.
when I first moved to Texas, and was one of there's one of the many reasons why I was vegan for quite some time, and even coming back, I'm still pretty anti rodeo and things along that nature, like horse racing. But
Mhm.
that's just cool that you're able to give them the more natural environment for the actual Longhorns and give them a much better life than what they previously had.
Yeah. Yeah. You take something that nobody wants and turn it into something that people need. Like, just on a business side, like, I'm not calving these things. I'm buying them from a guy who is calving them, raising them, using them for, he's got a rodeo barn in his farmyard, which is, quite a, quite a big to do there. But just taking something that nobody wants and turning it into a very nutrient dense, low cost per calorie food for my community, is a bit like, when I wrote that down, that's a business plan that was like, if that doesn't work, then I gotta relook at things. But that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Because like, I can't calf a longhorn for $700, but I can buy a 6 or 700 weight steer for that, put it on grass, add it 150 pounds. Like, I can't calf. I can't keep a cow for 3 months over the winter, or sorry, a calf over the winter for 3 months for that, right? I just can't. That doesn't pay. But when somebody doesn't want it, and I can turn it into something different and use it to, I guess at the end of the day, all I'm doing is grass farming, because all I want to do is grow more grass and make sure that that is able to capture sunlight and water. If I have something that does that for really low cost to my business, then why wouldn't I jump on that? And then on top of it, like I said, the longhorn is a way more beautiful animal, in my opinion, than a commercial cow, right? So it just worked well. It was a something that just kind of came all together, and it worked. Like, I was able to turn a profit in a first year ranching, which I know it's very small scale, but it turns into, beer and boat gas money, right? So like, it works. It worked, right? Which is, it's a big relief that it worked. And but at the end of the day, the only thing I'm looking at is making sure I'm grass farming. I want to make sure my grasses are healthy, because the soil to the grass to the protein, it's all one. It's all symbiotic. If you don't have healthy soils, you don't have healthy grass. If you don't have healthy grass, you don't have good beef. And you don't have good beef, you're in a tough spot trying to sell that, or trying to move it, right? So at the animal could be kind of whatever. I like the longhorn, like I said, because it's art, but it does a job really well at cleaning up some pasture that got away, and it does a really good job at turning grass into protein. So
I like that. And then on the topic of the soil health, because that is just such a critical component to it all. And just going back to you mentioning, because I love the saying, it's just throwing all kinds of products and not practices.
mhm.
What are some practices that you think it's really important to really build and improve the soil health? I know you mentioned intercropping, so
Oh yeah.
can you just talk more about that?
Yeah, I can touch on intercropping for sure. And like I'm still very new to the rotational grazing piece. I'm a wholehearted believer in it. But again, I have 1 year of experience and I'm not cross fencing anything. Next year, that's my plan. I wasn't gonna, jump in by the turbo wire yet and whatnot. But just from an intercropping standpoint, um, plants are conscious. They're able to talk to each other when you have a pulse, something that fixes nitrogen and an oil seed, um, they they work really well together. So the pulse will fix nitrogen and put it into the soil, and the oil seed will pull that out and use that, so you don't have to add any industrial fertilizer. Obviously, there still needs to be some phosphate there. However, that goes about, but just and then on a breathability standpoint, so a lot of pulses they perspirate, and perspiration in a monoculture setting leads to disease. Whereas if you intercrop that, the say a flax and a chickpea, that flax will help wick away that dew or that perspiration and actually just like suck it up and use it.
Hmm.
And it also helps airflow through the plant so that it can dry off. We get a lot of wind, right? So it's the when you look at nature, nothing is in monocrop. Um, Everything is working harmoniously. So, in a mono or in a polycrop setting, the roots will talk to each other. So if you have a place of saturation, those roots will start exudating water to places that are more dry, and we've seen that in lab studies. So like they want to be together in duality, and I think that's I think all you're doing is recreating God's grace, and um, it's a beautiful thing. And then in the harvestability side, the flax bolls are help broken down by the size of the chickpeas. So when it's going through the combine, it's it's like you don't have to readjust your settings. You don't have to put in something special because the chickpea seed will help break down the flax bolls, and then you get it like you don't have to reconfigure your combine. It's like it was supposed to be done, and
Hmm.
it's so cool. And yeah, we've got a intercrop expert. We've had her on our podcast, Lana Shaw. Um, she's just fantastic, doing some great research out of Redverse, Saskatchewan. So, um, yeah, I'm a big believer in it. Yeah, it's very inconvenient to separate the seed at the end, but then again, it's just practice over product.
It's also just amazing just hearing that example of just adding one intercrop species for that with how small of a detail that helps, because you're just mentioning just the moisture, but that can
Yeah,
change.
like chickpeas, where if you were to monocrop chickpeas, they're probably sprayed with a fungicide minimum 3 times.
Wow.
When they're intercropped with flax, their data has shown that you really don't have to spray them with a fungicide.
Hmm.
And that's a minimum $80 an acre Canadian that you don't have to spend,
On top
which
of
is
fixing the health of everything too, from that standpoint.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like so that's $80 just from product. That's not counting your man hours or your sprayer cost to go over that. So like at the end of the day, you're probably at $100 an acre just to keep that alive. And something I talk about often is we're killing things that want to live and keeping things alive that want to die. And so what's going on? Why is that? That shouldn't be. Like Gaia is always in perfect harmony. It's always wins, right? So why is that kochia growing there? It's not because it hates you. It's because Mother Earth wants to be covered in something. It needs to have green foliage. And we've selected out things that can survive there or that used to survive there. So now we've got this nasty bitch of a weed. It's We have to take a step back and look at things that why are we keeping things alive that want to die and killing things that want to live?
That's such a great point. And then just on the topic of weeds too, that's what kind of blew me away when learning just about the soil science and essentially the soil pyramid, that whenever part of the system is out of whack, then that causes diseases or these weeds to just pop up. And I don't know, it's just so fascinating how interconnected the whole system is. And it just kind of reminds me of just human anatomy, to where something's going on and you fix that, then the whole system picks it back up. And it's the same exact thing for agriculture.
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, Mother Earth is undefeated and wants to be covered in green foliage. So, um, if we look at desertified areas, it's more or less can be solved by practice. You know, Alan Savory can say he can regenerate almost any soil, right, with ruminants and compact and tight animal herding, which until he's proven wrong, I think he's right. Like I think that we can all these like these salinity areas that we have, they're not just they're not a wasteland. It's just a wasted opportunity, and we just have to be able to look at things a little bit different. So yeah, the soil wants to grow something. That's its purpose. It's to feed as above, so below. It's trying to make its below um, healthy by creating something above, and we're trying to kill it. And we have these white salty patches in the field, and they aren't growing anything. So, but if we're able to change the way we look at things, and like I said, it's really inconvenient to go separately do 1 acre out of 160. It is super inconvenient and almost not worth your time. But if you want if you want that soil to be healthy and productive for your kids or what have you, we just got to change the way we're doing things just a little bit. Yeah, I know it's super inconvenient. I know that. So
The last
yeah.
question I had was kind of going back to when you mentioned just the bed of snow and how that really helps with the soil health as well. For that example, especially in Saskatchewan, is there a lot of animals that are going around and on these pastures too? Because I know during that time you'd supplement with hay or something else. Because this is also just kind of going with the rotational grazing, and I mean you're doing ruminants as well. And yeah, I just
Mhm.
wanted to hear more on that.
Yeah, like a cow will go find grass under snow. There's a lot of guys, especially in like southern Alberta, that are winter grazing in pasture, which is kind of wild. A lot of guys will do like roll out bale and bale graze kind of on top. So like a way to use your winter pastures that I've been reading this again, not from experience, just from reading and trying to understand it, is some of these areas that aren't great grass or areas of productivity on your pasture land or on your farm, is these guys are taking bales of hay and rolling it out. They're underseeding it, so underseeding it before the winter comes with a triple forage triple grass mix kind of thing, rolling out bales of hay on top, and then you're kind of like swath or strip grazing a bale, and then you're moving them so that they're not compacting on that area. You're gonna get the cover of the soil with the hay and the manure and the defecation. You're gonna use the compaction to drive the seed in on top, and you have that nice layer of organic matter on top of it, and then you move them around so that the animal doesn't stand there the whole time, because even through the winter it can get muddy. A lot of hoofs and a lot of weight on one spot, no matter what your practices are going to lead to bare soil. So it's kind of an interesting way to do that in the winter time to help for the following season. And then you probably wouldn't come back to that for a full year, try to let those grasses grow and do its work. So it's kind of a cool thing. Some guys are bale grazing, where they're just separating paddocks and putting bales out in the wintertime, and fencing it off. So that's another cool practice. It's it, it's much. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but it is much more difficult to run cows all year in than some of the southern states.
Oh, I bet.
Or yeah, so a lot of guys get pretty creative. And again, I'm not talking from experience. This is just me trying to learn as much as I can. So the guys who do it and are profitable are those are those are some of the biggest wizards in agriculture, in my opinion. Like the and you're gutting it out. Like, it is not nice up here in the wintertime. Like, I've always said Saskatchewan weans out the weenies, like because we've got such sparse population with such high amounts of land that you kind of got to be a little, you got to have a different level of grit to live here all year round and make that work. And cowboys who do that are out there in -40, feeding, rolling hay, chipping ice out of water. Like that's a level of grit that I haven't reached yet. But God bless them because we need them to feed us. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm laughing as I'm sitting in sunny, warm Texas. So way
Yeah,
different.
that's beautiful. Yeah, we're I'll let you finish. We're gonna try to get to the southern states this winter just for a bit of a winter break. So, because the weather is beautiful down there and the people are great. So,
Well, thank you for joining, Logan. The last thing, if there's anything you'd like to plug, you can go ahead and do that.
yeah, I guess do a couple things. I'm just gonna say that ag retails are getting better every day at trying to build a more sustainable uh, agricultural system. Like I said, everybody has work to do. It's not one person; it's everybody has work to do. And then again, I'm gonna plug my podcast and business. I with two other fine gentlemen work on the Anecdote podcast. So we talk everything sports, agriculture, politics. It's a really diversified mix. And then my farming operation, you can find it on Instagram at Fire and Farm SASK. So AND Fire AND Farm SASK. Small little journey. There isn't much there, but I'm building towards that one day and trying to lead by example in the ruminant soil health space and just trying to learn and have fun. My learning budget is very high, so
I love
that's what
that.
I'll say.
And then I'll make sure to
Yeah.
include that in the show notes too, because like you were saying, you just wrapped up your first year. So I think for the folks that would be interested, they should definitely follow you and follow that journey along to see what that's like, because that's just such a great example. So thank you again, Logan.
Yeah. Man, appreciate you having me on. Like I said on the phone, I think having these conversations and podcasts like this and others are just one step closer to sovereign food security. And at the end of the day, you want to feed your family, nutrient dense, high quality meat and produce. And it starts with small farms and guys doing it differently, different systems. And like I said, yeah, the only thing that I know that pays for my family every time is feeding them whole, nutritious foods. So just talk to farmers, talk to a farmer, go to a farmer's market, ask questions, read a book. Like there's way more good guys than bad guys in ag, and even big ag gets demonized. All those guys are doing it at the end of the day is trying to feed their family, and all they just want to have a conversation. Then just ag is such a heartwarming and beautiful place to live, or beautiful place to work in. So all I can say is just keep keep education high on learning like these different systems. Just yeah, just go talk to a farmer, man. It's beautiful what you'll find out.
I agree. Well, thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Visit www.theregenaissance.co to learn more.